Entry 3. My first action. I stepped from the mists onto the cliffs above Boscastle and was immediately assailed by a fierce wind blowing sharp off the cold sea, pulling at my robes, the odour of the depths mixed with salt and fresh kelp on my lips. The crisp ozone texture of the ether buzzed all around me as the storm that I had stepped into raged against the cliffs, the roiling waves crashing percussive against the dark rocks, the sound bursting across the inlet with a kettle drum boom. Boscastle is a small fishing village on the north coast of Cornwall, its harbour inlet well shielded by a short but crooked, almost fjord-like rift in the land. Long ago, the ancestors of today's inhabitants had built two breakwater walls to keep out the worst ravages of the sea, but from my vantage, high above, it was plain that those walls had failed before the onslaught of the elemental force I assumed was the strength of a Feylord's anger. The few ships that were still in the harbour were wrecked or in the process of becoming so. Great waves were breaking over the thick bulwark, inundating the previously safe haven. Even as I watched, I witnessed the last small fishing boat that had been bravely weathering the storm succumb to a huge wave that surged over the defences. Like a hand slapping at a leaf on a pond, the torrent fell on the boat and drove it against the harbour wall. The din of its demise, a clamour of wood, water and rock. I felt then that I could hear on the wind a howl of anger and desolation. I looked away out across the sea, dark clouds reaching down to dark waters. On the horizon, the glimmer of late afternoon sunlight eclipsed by a murk only the sea can summon. And those summoning seas were breakers cresting, white and high, dark and deep, far out from the land, growing greater in tone as they rolled in, throwing their anger at the bluff black walls of the land, not as chaos or disorder as most might say, but rather as turbulence in a flow. And that turbulence had a rhythm, deep longing, and the anger of regret. I could feel the phased despair in the very ebb and flow of this relentless tidal bore, and I knew that if this so-called Sea Lord was allowed to continue with his anger against the land, then Boscastle would be no more by nightfall. And the many more towns and villages along that coast would succumb to his ire if they had not already done so. Then my intuitive eye spied, there below me, a black, sea-slickened outcrop of rocks, and so I shifted through the mists to come to stand upon the jagged platform, waves exploding white against the black stone. Standing there on the very edge of the land, I took out the live wand, and with the tip inscribed a thin white arc into the wet bedrock itself. The line shone brightly, not from light, but from alignment, and I drew a circle around me as a boundary of intent. With the closing of the circle, the roar of the storm diminished in volume, though not in significance. The circle not simply protection against force, but stabilization against collapse. There, within that circumference, my breath slowed. I closed my eyes, extending my intent, my awareness out towards the depths below. Perhaps I reasoned I might turn the phase attention toward myself, away from the town and its now breached walls, away from the land that shuddered beneath my feet. All around me, sea froth fell like salted champagne upon my purchase on the land. The wind tore at my hair, spray beading in my beard, the beautiful colours of that liminal space exploding high above me with every pounding beat. My own breath matching the sonorous tempo of the contention between land and sea. Time loosened. The linear sense dissolved. Minutes may have become hours. Hours indistinguishable from days. One breath to one wave. And then suddenly I felt the pressure shift. I opened my eyes. A figure stood before me upon the rock, tall, regal, terrible. Its skin was the grey of drowned granite. Fins traced his forearms and calves like sculpted crests. Deep green scales glinted beneath the stormlight. And its eyes burned red, not with fire, but with the intensity of ire. Behind him the storm writhed and the sea raged, but in his presence it seemed lesser, as though it were only the shadow cast by the turmoil of his state. This powerful creature stood strong, and he stood angry, gazing at me with what I knew to be contempt. "You dare to call me mortal?" he demanded sharply, and the wind bent around his voice. "I did not call you," I replied calmly, confident in the protection that the circle offered me, knowing I was in no immediate danger. Still, facing this lord of the sea, I was fully aware of the excitement and the thrill of danger at this meeting. His lip curled. "Do not mock me, mortal. I have no patience for your warm blood wastefulness. I say again, why do you call me?" I bowed in slight assent, out of the respect due a stranger, if nothing else. "Forgive my presumption, Lord. I am the way-teller, a magi of the inner sanctum, seeking only to save the people here." The Fey Lord dipped his head in response, and the howling gale diminished. "I am Fraxis," he responded, "Lord of the Dumnoni depths," and he gestured with a scaled hand out towards the open sea. "I too seek to save a people," he snarled. "My own people." I nodded, carefully, wary now. The circle and the live wand may have been ample protection from the Fey Lord Fraxis himself. But words have power, and agreements made with intent must be honoured, else the power lead back and bite you hard. "It seems we have a similar aim. Perhaps then," I offered, "we have a coincident cause." "I doubt both," scoffed the Fey Lord. "Something that is mine has been taken from the sea," he said. "It lies upon the land, and I cannot retrieve it," his anger growing once more, though not petulant or even emotional, but rather it felt structural, like the turbulence of the waters that still pounded the cliffs. "So I must break the land until it returns to the sea," he stated. "My lord," I said in reply, "I know you cannot long remain upon the land. The boundary weakens you." His gaze sharpened then, but I continued. "Throwing your strength against the land will not avail you in your search, unless you know its location." I looked about me at the raging storm that assailed the length of the coast as far as I could see. "Which by the looks of it you do not," I added. The storm surged fresh about me, and the wind reached a crescendo howl. "I ask that you cease your assault against these shores," I called, trying to be heard above the crashing waves. "If you agree, I will search the land in your stead." The storm surged higher, as though in protest, then abated slightly, hesitating. Fraxis studied me, measuring. Then slowly, like an orca returning to the depths from the shallow-shored hunt, the tempest faded. The dark clouds tore open. Sunlight broke across the cliffs, and the sea, moments before apocalyptic, fell into heavy, rolling swells. The air lightened, and the pressure lifted. He nodded. "What I seek," he said at last, "is no trinket. It is my anchor, my heart, perhaps. Without it, the coherence of my domain here will fail." "Then I give you my word, as a magi, that I will return it to you," I replied. "What is it that you seek, my lord?" I asked. Fraxis looked at me with all his intent, and I saw then that if I failed, the seas would forever abjure my presence. Such would be his disappointment and his anger. "I am seeking a pearl of midnight hue, a pearl that shines by night. A pearl that sings in sunlight," replied Fraxis proudly, as though speaking of an honoured guest. I nodded, My strategy had worked. Though I knew much damage had been done, I felt that by merely setting out to seek for the pearl, I would give the people of the coast time to rebuild their towns and villages, to begin their trade once more. And confident that I would indeed find what was so close to this Lord's heart, this pearl that shines by night, then his allegiance, and perhaps even his respect, would be gained in turn. And so began my first true action for the inner sanctum. What transpired thereafter I leave to E.B. Shriver's own account, at least for the time being. But it is sufficient to say that I succeeded, and in reward I was given the oracular, now known as the Eye of Morodin. Little did I know how much that reward would alter my life.